Oh, we're up now, Steve.
Okay. Boker Tov, good morning. I'm Rabbi Stephen Moskowitz, and this is our morning musings on Monday, just a spiritual kickstart to this week. I'm joined by my longtime friend, Rabbi Deborah Wechsler of Chizuk Amuno congregation in Baltimore. We go back 30 years, I think, 30 plus years to 1991 when Debbie and I met at the 92nd Street Y. We were both working at the Bronfman Center for Jewish Life. So shout out to Rabbi David Woznicka, who hired both of us and helped to cement our friendship. Debbie just celebrated 20 years at Chizuk Amuno congregation in Baltimore. So congratulations, Debbie. And I invited Debbie to join with us on this Monday morning to continue our discussion of prayer. And most especially because Debbie is a conservative rabbi, and for those who don't know, I'm a Reform rabbi, and we thought this would maybe elucidate some differences in our philosophies about prayer. So Debbie, I'm going to turn it to you first. Why pray? Why do you pray?
Some days I pray because I have to. Some days I pray because I'm moved to. Some days I pray because everybody else is praying and I want to be part of what everybody else is doing. I think that that's probably number two is the one that's most powerful for me, is that there are moments when I move to pray. That there is something inside me, there is some experience that I've had that moves me to have a spiritual connection, to reach out beyond myself. And prayer is a way to do that. I really connect to the music in prayer. For me, those are my best prayer experiences. When I'm there and everybody is engaged in the music, that really feels like it carries me.
Well, you talked about, when you are moved to pray.
Yeah.
So like, what are those moments like? Those sort of that moment that moves you, or that you want to pray.
I guess I think of them as very typical moments for people, like the moments of extreme gratitude, when it just sort of pours out of you. For me, I think it's even gratitude more than fear or terror. That just makes me feel that I want to reach out outside myself and express that. And most of the time, the words of the Siddur, I find the prayer book, I find incredibly resonant and relevant for me, so that it gives me a language. The prayer service that I know or that I'm comfortable with, you know this, Steve, like my background's been mostly in the very traditional world. So, spontaneous prayer was not something that I ever came to until probably CPE, when we trained in the hospital's clinical pastoral education, and they used to force us to do spontaneous prayer. I don't know if that was part of either your training as a Reform rabbi or that was something that you were used to. But I don't think I ever in my life had sat down and, either stood by somebody's bedside or sat at a dining table and expressed a spontaneous prayer. It was not me. It was not an experience I ever had. And that was something of a revelation in my prayer life. But for the most part, it's still the set liturgy that really speaks to me.
Yeah, I have to say, for me, I lean on the Siddur, on the prayer book. I mean, I don't know if I don't want to, sometimes maybe it's crutch. Like I don't feel confident in my own words, or I don't feel confident what I would say before God in terms of a prayer. I feel more comfortable, borrowing or using the words of our tradition. And that also, honestly, it feels more authentic than what I could possibly offer. I don't know if we're that different in terms of that. It was fascinating to me that you said that the most sort of when you feel inspired to pray was more in terms of gratitude, because I think if you asked many people, it would be more it comes out of a sense of desperation or need, like they're in a a crisis in their life, and they come to pray. For many congregants, I think the most meaningful prayer remains, the Mishaberach for healing that we offer, and that comes out of a tremendous need. And you turn that around in terms of talking about gratitude when you feel a sense of thankfulness.
I see them as I almost see them as two sides of the same coin, in the sense that somebody who's so incredibly grateful for, you put in the context of like for healing, for having been saved, to use very dramatic language. I think often that gratitude is tied up in the terror, in the flip side of it.
So, when my brother and I were talking, some weeks ago, we both said in terms of our most meaningful prayer experience, it was more outside, more in nature or at camp.
Yeah.
I wonder how you would respond to that, in terms of if you had to pinpoint a prayer experience of that was it. Like I got it at that moment, or I felt it at that moment.
I do also feel really, really tied to the outdoors. We're actually doing, I do an annual camp Friday night, a camp Shabbat at Shul. I lead it with one of my lay people who's a Reform song leader, actually. So I've sort of learned the repertoire over the years, and we're trying to figure out what it's going to look like if we have an outdoor amphitheater for prayer at Chizuk that we built a number of years ago.
Right.
And we wear our whites like we used to in camp, and she's got her guitar, and we walk from the parking lot out to the, we really try to
the Shabbat walk kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, like that's a beautiful experience. I do sort of separate when I'm leading and when I'm a regular davener. I don't know if you have the same.
You want to talk a little bit more about that? Because my brother and I, we struggle with that in terms of,
the performance art aspect of prayer.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's a moment where you're like, okay, what page am I doing next?
Right.
And am I,
right.
It's so, and especially in the Reform context, there's a lot more, that we might be, in terms of like the rabbi's call, for standing up or sitting down.
I don't think that's very different. It's very disruptive.
What's disruptive?
To have to get up and announce a page, like before the Amida. I do it every single service. But
you mean it's disruptive for yourself and your own prayer.
Yeah. And that's assuming I'm even in a good prayer space. Right. It's a very different experience being a davener, being someone who prays, and being the person who's leading, whether that's doing the singing part or doing the chanting. For me, that's really highlighted on the high holidays, where I feel like if I'm able to find like one moment of true prayer at some point between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, really, I'm grateful. Because otherwise, I'm sort of like the ringmaster of a 3-ring shawl, not a circus, not in a demeaning way, but it's very hard to be lost in the experience of praying when you can't be lost in it because you're guiding.
Yeah. So by the way, I would just, the second day of Rosh Hashanah is my favorite service of the year, if I'm allowed to say that, because it's not as largely attended at our synagogue. So there's not nearly as many moving parts.
Yeah.
I call up volunteers for the aliyot and for the honors, as opposed to on every other day, it's assigned and letters go out and people RSVP whether they're going to accept the honor or not. And so like, there's so many moving parts. Like, are they here? Is the person who RSVP'd?
Right. Right.
And so in Rosh Hashanah, second day of Rosh Hashanah, I can just kind of like just enjoy the tefillah, the prayer, and I don't give a sermon. I lead a discussion, and so there's not that whole thing. Oh, is that how? I wonder how that line's going to fall on my sermon. I hope they think it's as funny as I thought it was when I wrote it. So there's so much pressure when you're leading, and it's supposed to be this spiritual experience. So
but I think I think the davener has similar challenges, even for myself when I'm the rare experiences when I'm at a minyan where I'm not the rabbi, where I'm at a service. depending on what else is going on in my head, it also can be very, very difficult to lose myself in the davening. But at least I feel like there's a greater chance. I don't worry about following along. There are times, despite the fact that I use the traditional liturgy, there are times that I like not having a siddur. That there's something freeing about it, both because I'm very easily distracted.
I think we all are.
So like when I say the Amidah, I close my eyes. Thank goodness after all these years, I know it by heart, but that way I know I can close out all the other things that are going on. And when I'm in shul as a davener, that is actually one of the great pleasures is being able to put the book down next to me and just experience prayer without being so tied to the props.
I think the level of attention that would be theoretically required if you were fully spiritually attentive from start to finish for even just a weekday service, let alone Shabbat or the holidays, it's almost impossible that you can be at that moment through the entire prayer experience. So one of the strengths of the traditional liturgy, regardless of how much or how little a synagogue does, is that hopefully there's a moment in there,
right?
Like hopefully, like at least this prayer gets you, or this this chanting or singing of this prayer gets you. Or I even say to people sometimes, like, what, if you wander, and the new Reform Movement's Machzor, High Holiday Prayer book, has a lot of commentary, and some people told me they were just wandering on other pages and reading, and I'm like, great,
right?
You don't have to be on this just because I'm announcing this page. You don't have to be there.
I'm giving the same reminder every year. Yeah,
it's okay. Like, wherever you find yourself, and if something strikes you, I think that is wonderful. Yeah. You had said before we started that you wanted to talk about like this, so I don't want to forget. I'm trying to be a good host here. So you wanted to talk about like the Zoom experience, which we've all been doing, this online prayer experience that we've been doing for the last several months, and how it's, transforming things. You're in the same situation in Baltimore, I believe, as we are in New York.
Yeah, we may even be a little bit behind you, because you got in New York, in the sense that I think New York is like 2 weeks further along in your virus progression than we
are.
Go
New York.
So we haven't opened up. I was saying to you before we started, and in some ways I think our conversation sort of naturally went there, which is why I thought we were, whether we got there or not, that was okay with me, is that I'm finding it very interesting how the mode of how we pray now, meaning on Zoom, at home, in my kitchen, in my living room, that the mode has changed kind of the method and the substance of prayer. I think it has. Yeah.
You talk about the substance.
So there are different practical concerns, right? So for all of the grumbling that everybody does, and me too, Shabbat morning services are too long in the service. Certainly one of the challenges that we have in the conservative movement is that we're so stinking traditional that we always add. We never take away.
Right.
And so it means that like we're left with this tome of a prayer book, and even when we just do like the bare minimum, like we have a 2.5 hour service on Shabbat morning.
That's very hard to sustain, I think, especially online.
So and we haven't been. So we've cut down. People don't have the Sitzfleisch to sit in front of a Zoom. I know how I feel after an hour of Zoom. I'm just done. I'm zoomed out. And I think that a lot of us are having that experience the longer this goes on, that we just get zoomed out. We get tired of this kind of interaction. So what's been interesting to me, and I guess I should say that Chizuk is it's a pretty traditional conservative shul. Susie grew up in Baltimore, so she's familiar with the milieu. I think Baltimore is like a small C conservative Jewish community in general. but we really had one prayer service, one type of prayer service. And when we switched, we did it very quickly. We changed over right away. We still say Kaddish, we still say Brachot, we Zoom on Shabbat. We do lots of things that maybe some other conservative synagogues aren't doing. And for us, there really wasn't a question that we were going to continue to be able those kinds of services. But we have cut down, and certainly more at the beginning than at the end. We were very creative in what we were creating as a prayer service. We were really thoughtful about what did people need, that they needed comfort and they needed an opportunity to sing, and they needed an opportunity to study a little bit in the service and an opportunity to gather. But they probably didn't need to say every single psalm,
Right.
and Psukei D'Zimra and Shacharit. So we don't do that anymore.
Yeah. I think my sense about this is that we have to think differently
Yeah.
About what the prayer experience is in terms of what the form and the format that we're doing right now. It can't be just like whatever we did in the synagogue and the shul, we're just going to take to our computer screens and our laptops, because it doesn't, not everything translates.
Exactly.
And the attention span is exponentially less, I think, on the computer screen. And it's just because it's almost, there's a part of it that's more exhausting than sitting in the congregation. So, we've also tried to think about it, very differently and very intentionally, what it is that people need and crave. The power of Zoom is that you can see everyone in the gallery view, which is just extraordinary. And it was I was very skeptical that we would, for example, be able to do a Shiva minyan on the computer screen, but it was an incredibly powerful visual representation of the community coming out and healing and offering healing, when you could scroll through pages and pages in the gallery view of people who had come on to offer their condolences. And you could, that was extraordinary. On the positive side, the level of participation is greater because it's so much easier to participate.
Yeah.
You don't really have to worry so much about what you're wearing. I've watched people finish a bottle of wine during the course of the service, which I assume makes the service more enjoyable. So, and it's just, people could be more relaxed.
Yeah.
They don't feel as on, as a performance in a sense, because they're in their home. And that's ironically, and this, I want to sort of conclude with this, that's exactly, Judaism has always said that the home is the center.
It's so interesting that Judaism has returned to the home. There have been a lot of profound lessons from the pandemic, and I think that's one of them.
Yeah, so that everything is home centered, and you can do it, and now it's almost easier for us to be in everyone's home at the same time, and so that's an extraordinarily positive thing. So look, we've promised that we would keep these to 15 to 20 minutes at most, and I've been inviting my friends to join us and to hope offer some spiritual kickstart to the week. As we said, I want to thank my friend Rabbi Deborah Wechsler. Debbie, it's been great to reconnect with you. And I have to say, one of the nice things about, I don't want to say one of the nice things about the pandemic, but one of the nice things about being forced to be in our homes is that many of us have reached out to longtime friends and old friends and reconnected. And that's been a wonderful and beautiful thing for this experience. So I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful to learn with you. And again, I hope people find some inspiration in our discussions.
Thanks, everybody.